Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on Superman and Lois, a bit of Stargirl potentially, but just the CW and I guess DCTV on the CW as a whole. So as most of us would know by now and hopefully should know by now, the CW was sold recently by Warner Brothers and Paramount, who held an equal 50-50 ownership over it previously, with Nexstar, a big corporation that sort of focuses on like localized TV, like dealings, I guess you could say, being the one to take the majority ownership, with Warner Brothers and Paramount holding on to a minority share as well. I think it's either 12.5 as a whole or 12.5% each, so that 25% with them together, I think. And along with this, they have the option for like first look content as well, but that's sort of packaged with like the whole minority share thing. Now, when the CW sold, we knew there would be some changes. It just mattered when these changes happened. So you could argue the big cancellations that happened earlier this year was a part of that, first start of change, which it was. That's brought up later in the video. But there wasn't any sort of like positional changes in regards to hierarchy and all that. At the beginning, it was going to be one of those things where we had to wait and see what happened. But one recent change that was inevitable in some people's eyes, which I was one of them, as I did bring it up in recent videos on the topic, was the exiting of Mark Pedowitz from chairman and CEO of the CW, along with the heads of marketing, streaming, and financing. So some important areas. Now, if you're coming in to take over a company like the CW, you are going to put your own people in place. So if you're Nexstar buying it, you're going to put the people that you trust in those places, especially if you don't trust how certain things were dealt with in the past under the other ownership and all that, just especially in important positions like that. I know some people were surprised by Mark Pedowitz exiting, but it was just one of those things that was, as I said, inevitable. He was in such a high position. Nexstar was always going to put one of their own people in there. However, this then started a completely new discussion when that news came out, which revolved around, the future of current shows on the CW. Of course, we know shows like The Flash is ending, along with another long-running show in the form of Riverdale. But a lot of the other shows that are on the CW at the moment are in their earlier seasons, like within the first 2 or 3 seasons or so. All the other shows that were in their later stages either ended or were cancelled. So all these current shows outside of The Flash and Riverdale wouldn't be towards the end of their, natural end, if you want to say. Well, we got an update on the state and potential futures of a few shows, though the lack of mentioning of other shows may point to some concern. However, some other recent events in regards to some of these shows, or at least one show in particular, could maybe hint that there are plans for those shows, or that show in particular, even if the new CW heads don't have plans for them. So over the past couple of days, the Hollywood Reporter released a piece on the current state of the CW following the complete and takeover and acquisition of the CW by Nexstar, and what it means for certain shows, as well as including information they've heard from reliable sources, most likely from within the CW itself. So this first quote is more on the positive side of things in regards to the handful of shows mentioned, if you were really going to say there's a positive side. Sources say Nexstar plans to focus on the CW's linear schedule and become more affiliate friendly. Sook and Miller are said to be fans of such broad CW fare as Jared Padalecki's Walker franchise, Greg Berlanti's Superman and Lois, and the family-focused Kung Fu. All 3 shows were among the few series to earn early renewals in March, ahead of the CW's May cancellation spree that left it with 11 scripted originals, the same tally Pedowitz inherited when he took over the network in 2011. So obviously this is good news for those shows, and obviously in regards to what we talk about in the channel in particular, Superman and Lois. And Superman and Lois is one of those ones where I think it'd be hard for the CW and the new brass that are there to sort of just cut the head off there, even if there were smishes in regards to maybe the profitability around it, because Superman and Lois has sort of set itself up to be a show 4 or 5 years, maybe in regards to what they're telling story-wise, but also in regards to the money spent in regards to developing the show. If you know some of the behind-the-scenes stuff in regards to the show, like they've built that entire downtown Smallville thing. That's not a random city that's in Vancouver or a little area in Vancouver or in it, like whatever. That's built completely from scratch to be downtown Smallville for Superman and Lois. So they've got money invested there and they're thinking, okay, we're going to spend some time here. So you don't see Superman and Lois ending before season 5. You think it at least gets to season 5 and then maybe it ends after that, just because of the money invested. And obviously that might go for the same thing like Walker. I'm not too sure where they filmed it, like in regards to the production stuff around that show and stuff like that. Kung Fu is probably a surprising one. I know it's well received, and when it goes to HBO Max, I think it's well viewed there as well. But you would argue that for a couple of the other shows as well that are on the CW that are affiliated with HBO Max, and even the same for Paramount Plus, like how they perform over there. But you might be thinking like, okay, well, they mentioned some shows they have confidence in, which I guess is a good thing, but they only mentioned, 3 shows. That's not that many, especially when, as it says before, there's 11 scripted originals and only 3 of them were mentioned. Less than a third, just over a quarter. Now, of course, there would be some new shows in the future that come from Warner Brothers or Paramount as a part of that minority share deal if the CW likes to look at those potential future shows, but something else was brought up in that article that might cause concern for the shows that were not mentioned because it links to what, might have officially pushed the opening piece of news from this video into action. Multiple sources say Pedowitz planned to stay on top of the CW, but talks with Nexstar leadership went south over what some suggest were issues with his reporting structure and the direction they plan to take the network. So in regards to it being the reason Mark Pedowitz left, as I've said, it was inevitable that he would have left a position. It just mattered when. He could have stayed there for another year, but eventually Nexstar would have wanted to probably put their own person in place. Maybe they would just want to find the right person, and I guess they believe they know the right person right now, so they're fine with pushing Mark Pedowitz out of that position. But obviously there was some back and forth in regards to how things were dealt with and maybe what the plans were going forward. But yeah, in regards to just keeping it simple, not dilly-dallying around with some other random shows, just keeping it simple in regards to the shows that weren't mentioned that we want to talk about. What about Stargirl? That's a big concern that I saw people really worried about. There's still not been a renewal for Stargirl, obviously, because otherwise we wouldn't be worrying about it. Stargirl's in its 5 episodes down, a 13 episode season. And if it were to be renewed, they'd be filming in a very weird period. Stargirl's always had a genuine time it gets renewed fairly early, or at least early in regards to when it films, because it films around this time of the year. So if it gets renewed now, we might be a year without Stargirl, if not more, if they decide to film at the same time they usually do. So that's a concern for Stargirl, and it makes you really think that season 3 might be the final season, even though there hasn't been any confirmation. And the fact there hasn't been any confirmation now makes you wonder whether they're still unsure what's happening there, or maybe it's ending on the CW, but maybe there's another option. And that option that a lot of people brought up, because it's definitely a possibility it can happen, is that the CW ends Stargirl as a CW show, but it moves to HBO Max and becomes an HBO Max original. Now, this could maybe, as some people have theorized, be why we're having that Titans Doom Patrol crossover coming this season on Titans with Stargirl being involved. That might be why that's happening, because that crossover is so random. And it makes much more sense for Stargirl to cross over with Superman and Lois or The Flash or both than to randomly appear on Titans, which is, an explicit show, along with Doom Patrol, which once again is an explicit show with explicit characters and stuff like that. It's such a random crossover to the point where it doesn't make any sense, but it will somehow still make sense on the show, you would have to think. But it's also jumping from networks, jumping from the CW over to HBO Max. And yes, I know it's still a Warner Brothers property, but it's still crossing over in more than a standard crossover would, if that makes sense. So maybe it's setting that up. Maybe that's why there hasn't been any news about Stargirl's being cancelled or ending, because it's not. It might be ending its run as a CW production, but now it's going to move over and be an HBO Max original. Not saying that's confirmed, but the fact that there hasn't been an announcement on what's going on with it makes you wonder. Now, the big issue around that is that, for example, Yvette Monreal, who plays Yolanda on the show Wildcat, she's been cast in another show, but it seems like it's one of those shows that films for 2 or 3 months and then it's done. So if Stargirl was to get renewed for a season 4, that whole show wouldn't impact what she would do on Stargirl or anything like that. So yeah, the whole Stargirl thing is a wait and see. It's worrying that there has not been any real news about it, but at the same time, maybe that's good news as well, because maybe that they're figuring out what to do with it, which could involve it going to HBO Max. So yeah, maybe that's what's going on there. But seeing that we're moving towards the end of the year, we're in the final third of the year now, seeing that we're officially in October, you would think we're going to hear more and more from the CW in regards to what they plan to do for next season, because they're going to have to start putting some shows into development, which then move into the pilot season, because they're not going to have no new shows. I think they're going to have some new shows. Of course, there's new shows that have started filming that will come out at the beginning of next year. And I think this week they premiered a few of their new shows as well. But they're also going to just have the new shows that come into development that also replace some shows that are ending and everything like that. So I don't know if we'll get any DC shows. Of course, the Justice U thing is a question mark. There was some Justice U stuff that came out, which I'll include in another video. But I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see what they do. And at least we know that Superman and Lois appears to be safe because they're fans of it. But of course, the Stargirl thing is still a question mark. And I don't know, it just makes you think that Gotham Knights might be dead on arrival. But then again, it could surprise a lot of us when it comes out, and maybe it's decently solid, and the CW is impressed by the performance. But yeah, it seems like the CW is changing a lot, which yeah, has a lot of people shocked because it's just been such a staple for so many years. So it's gonna be weird seeing this big change. But we'll have to wait and see how big the change is. Maybe it's minimal and it's an overreaction, but from everything that's coming out, it seems like the reaction is somewhat appropriate. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on it, show your support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various thoughts on this. Are you happy that Superman and Lois seems to be favorable in the new CW owners' eyes and that it's going to continue? Do you have your worries for Stargirl? Do you think it could move to HBO Max if the CW doesn't want to move on with it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye.